You're listening to How I Sell, a podcast built for early career sales professionals. You'll hear stories, best practices, and guidance from top sales leaders on what it takes to become a sales superstar. Today's episode is made possible by Ramped Careers. Ramped is on a mission to build the next generation of workforce-ready talent. Today, I'm so excited to bring Tim Teeter to our show. Tim is the Vice President of Business Development at Yaypay. Tim is a master relationship builder. In a world that's full of sharks, he is one of the nicest people that you'll run into. Thank you for joining us today, Tim.
Thanks, Manoj. Glad to be here.
And listen, I've known you for a while, and we have a history of working with each other. But for those that don't know you, who is Tim Teeter?
Oh, goodness. Let's see. I have worked at startups for the last quarter of my career. So from a professional standpoint, I've really pivoted from working at some larger companies. I worked at Oracle. I've worked at Pearson Education. I've worked at a couple of other larger banks in a previous life. But over the last, I would say, decade or decade and a half, I've really focused on more kind of the startup type of business, startup culture. And so that from a professional perspective, I've really shifted myself from large to kind of the small perspective when it comes to the types of companies that I work with. From a personal perspective, Tim Teeter, I'm a runner. I run marathons. I've been doing that since the better part of since the mid 90s. So I've run 11 marathons, and hopefully, COVID willing, I'll be able to get back and get back on my training schedule and get back to running those types of things, because I really do enjoy it. It's a great way to stay in shape. Have a family, live in Minneapolis. Have two girls that are 12 and 16, and one is actually learning to drive as we speak. So knock on wood, I'm gonna be white knuckling it here until she gets her license and gets on the road.
That's amazing, Tim. Thanks for sharing that. And while we're at it, do you also want to address the fun background that you have? I know you're a huge fan. So share your love.
For those who are familiar with this scene, I'm a Badger. So I went to the University of Wisconsin Madison, and this is my happy place. This is the Memorial Union Terrace. I worked there. I spent a lot of time there as a student, and going back and as an alumni, going to the various football games. So it's a great place and phenomenal atmosphere.
That's awesome. Let's start there, Tim, if we may. You're a student. You went to school for accounting. You're probably sitting outdoors and working on your debits and credits, just about to graduate. What was going on in the back of your mind? Did you have a pulse on what you wanted to do professionally? Did you know that you'd be a BD rock star, or what was happening then?
I will have to say no. I mean, I've taken. I mean, you and I were just speaking about this. I took a fairly. It wasn't a very linear path to get to this point in my career. So, starting out in Madison, I actually started at Marquette University before moving to Madison. So, I transferred after my freshman year, but. I always wanted to do something in business, always wanted to do something related to accounting. I was always pretty good with numbers and I always felt that if you are good at accounting, you kind of know how businesses work. You know how things work. You can possibly plug yourself into a finance team or into a sales operations team, or just across the board. It seemed to me to be a really good general course of study for a kid my age to come out of college and I think have a little bit of maneuverability in your career. A lot of my friends went into at the time I would think it was Big Six, now it's Big Four, CPAs, CPA firms. They went and got their CPA. I never wanted to get my CPA, so I decided to just find a role and actually got a job at a bank and did some internal audit function there for a little while and worked in their compliance, corporate compliance department for a little while. So that scratched the itch, but I always was technical. And so I moved from the corporate compliance side more into a business analyst type of a role. And that's really where I got introduced into software and into the technology realm and into the various projects. And so to me, that was, I think, the turning point early in my career where I shifted from the accounting side into more of the technology or technical side of things. And so I worked at a company by the name of US Bank here in Minneapolis. They're actually one of the top largest banks in the United States. And so I got my feet wet in their internal IT group and did a lot of projects for the various branches and for the various credit scoring systems internally. And that's how I got my start in the career. It married the accounting side up a little bit and with kind of more of my penchant for the technical side of things.
Got it. And so you quickly realized that early on, you still haven't, really wrapped your head around the fact that, where you would really shine is in this whole world of building complex relationships, relationships. Early on, you did this for a few years. It looks like you took a break to go back to business school. Is that right?
I did. Yeah. I moved from US Bank. I worked at Oracle, which actually married up the accounting with the technical side of things. So I was an implementation consultant with their ERP solutions. So that was kind of to me, that was the role that opened up everything in my career. From there, I did go back to graduate degree at University of Minnesota. As you can tell, my background is not the University of Minnesota; it's University of Wisconsin. But I will claim to be a Gopher, but I'm a Badger at heart. So yes, I did go back. I did get my MBA, and I think having worked at the bank and having worked at Oracle, I wanted to take a little bit of a different slant because being on the product side, I really wanted to be in more of the product management type of a role where you are really the CEO of your own product. And so you own the P&L, you own the product direction, you owned a lot of the relationship side of things. So for me, going back and getting my master's degree in marketing and IS and with this emphasis on supply chain, it really helped me broaden my skill set. And from there, I was able to garner a few roles on the product management side and product marketing. And that's, to me, that's really where the itch, I always felt entrepreneurial I always had that feeling that I really wanted to be more entrepreneurial. But being in that type of a role, you got to work with partners all the time. And to me, working with the partners was the entry point into the startup world where I ultimately met you a few years ago when we started working together at Yaypay.
So, I mean, even up until this point, right, it looks like you held on to a business analyst role, found your niche with things that are technical in nature, switched to product marketing. There's a common theme connecting all of them, but they're also very different roles, just looking at it objectively. How did you manage to get yourself in front of so many hiring managers and spin a story and a consistent message to be able to get these roles? Because the reason I ask this is because oftentimes a lot of folks that, want to, let's say, switch to a career in sales or BD, feel like they may not be able to do so, and that the only path into it is if you start as a BDR and then maybe become an account manager and then maybe work your way up. But
right,
this is your story is a case study in there's other ways you can get there. However, I'm curious to learn a little more about the tactical. How did you get there? How did you convince all these people to give you jobs and then make that switch?
Well, just as you can see, my lively personality and rugged good looks. So no, I'm just kidding. So yeah, that's actually a great question, because I've always positioned myself up for my next role.
Mm-hmm.
I've always kind of architected my career to a point where, yes, I enjoy doing this for a while, but like, what's that next step? What's that next mountain to climb? What's that next career opportunity? And so, from just going back to the U.S. bank side of things, and being the business analyst, I always felt, you know what, I was never in charge of the product. I kind of wanted to be in charge of more of the product side. And so I got my feet wet at Oracle. Got that role opened up a whole host of other opportunities. But in between that and going back to school, I always kind of felt that my background in accounting, being a recovering accountant, I always like to call myself. I'm not truly a CPA, but recovering. Marry up the accounting with the ERP background,
Mm-hmm.
and having just build that network of acquaintances, and it just from sales all the way down to product, all the way down to support. Just if there was any word of wisdom that I could do, is that I could say, never burn a bridge. Always connect with everybody in your organization from every walk of life, from support down to or all the way up to the top of the sales, just because you never know how it's going to impact you in your career. And so I think, getting back to your original question, I've always kind of nurtured my career to look at what's that next role. And
Mm-hmm.
so from product marketing, I was able to develop a great relationship with the head of business development at Avalara.
Mm-hmm.
And which was, at the time, it was a startup. It was a 40-person startup when I started working with them, when I was doing product marketing at Epicor. And I always marveled at they were cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
I always marveled at their ingenuity,
Yeah.
and how they kind of wound their way into the organization. They weren't always good citizens, just because they were building a business, and they were just bootstrapping it up from the ground up. And so I started working with them early on, and I just that was my first taste at really working with a true startup. And right then and there, that's when I got the bug, and I felt to myself, I think a company like Avalara would really benefit from working. They would benefit from working with me, and I would benefit from working with them. And so like I said, I built a great relationship up with the sales team and the product team and the business development team. We built a really great business between Epicor and Avalara. And when the timing was right, I jumped ship and was able to go on to, at the time, which was a relatively small company. I think I joined Avalara when it was maybe 100 people or so. When I left 3 years ago to join Yaypay, I think we were upwards of between 1,500 and 2,000 employees, and had grown through a number of acquisitions, and a lot of it was really just growing through just adding people. And it was such a great experience, and I got to work in all levels of the organization. And that's really where I started my journey on the business development side. It's been relatively recent, within the last decade, 7 to 10 years, that I really started to work with it. But it was nurtured extensively throughout my career, not in business development, but in product, because I built those relationships with these people. And case in point, I had a meeting with a good friend of mine from my early days at Epicor, and he's moved on to another company, and I've moved on to another company, but we kept in touch. And as a result, we're actually going to have a partnership between Yaypay and the company he works for. So it's just a testament to building the network, keeping the network, staying in touch, never burning a bridge, and just keep having your eye on what's next.
Yeah, it's incredible that you mentioned that, and you've said this a couple of times. Again, I've had the good fortune of having firsthand work with you, and I think you're one of the few people that is incredibly good at this. Not just building a relationship one off, but maintaining it, nurturing it, growing it. And I think you treat, it's my unbiased perspective, is you treat a professional relationship not very much different from a personal relationship. I think you're a genuinely nice guy. Now, for those that, may not have this skill naturally, and I don't know how much of it is natural for you. I don't want to make the assumption. You may very well have had to work towards it. What tactical advice do you have? If I came to you and said, Tim, I'm not naturally good at this. It doesn't come to me. And yet I'm tasked with of having to do this, and it's the right thing to do. How do you think about this, right? I run into a new person. You make it seem so effortless, but I wonder, what are the inner workings of it? How do you make it happen?
I always, I like to solve problems with technology. And so what made, I always like to say this, what made Avalara make accountants teary-eyed was just seeing the demo of the solution, showing how their life could be massively different after, before and after implementing a solution like Avalara, and for sales and use tax automation. For those who don't understand it, it's a huge, painful problem for any finance organization that has any exposure in more than 5 or 6 or 7 states. And actually, with today's tax environment, it actually could be 1 or 2 states. But at the end of the day, I love solving problems with technology and applying technology to problems. And that's what Avalara does, and that's what Yaypay does. And so to me, it is about the relationship. It is about being personable and being empathetic and putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. But if your solution can solve a problem for somebody else and for a business, and it could be done through a great ROI. Avalara always had a great ROI. Yaypay has a tremendous ROI when it comes to applying the technology and getting payback on that investment in that technology. It comes immediate within the first few months. But I always start with the problem and then work my way into how the relationship can and should work. There are some relationships that are very transactional, and you should know that going in. And it's not going to be necessarily a long-term relationship. And so therefore you kind of have to treat those relationships as transactional and put them off to the side and work them as they come up or as needed. But it's to me, it's just being able to have the vision to understand what's more transactional and then what's more long-term, and the longer-term relationships. Those sometimes take years to come to fruition, and it's all about nurturing, when to push, when to pull, and it's so you're in essence just I liken it to keeping the plate spinning. Kind of you put the plate on a wooden rod and you're kind of run around and you keep them spinning. It's almost a very large game of doing that in partnerships, because you have to let things sail off and then have them potentially come back to you, and using a kind of a boat analogy. But then there are others who take constant attention to keep the plate up. So it's to me, it's just kind of learning the balance between which partnerships are really going to pay off, which partnerships you can apply technology to, and which are much more transactional in nature.
It reminds me about the stamina and the willingness to kind of play the long game, and the willingness to just stick with it that you need to actually run a marathon. When you think about it, right? It's delayed gratification. The process may be long. You may need to speed up some places. You may need to slow down some places. You may need to be aware of yourself. I mean,
that's a great analogy. I never even thought about it. The first half is fun. The second half is really, really not so fun. And the last couple miles suck, but once you're done, there's euphoria, right?
Does this, Do you think your passion for running kind
Well,
of translates into
I
BD, or
guess
is it the other way around?
it's just my temperament, really. I mean, I'm fairly patient, and I don't force things if they don't need to be forced, and so I think really at the end of the day that it's just my temperament that I can play the long game, and I don't have impatience for when a partnership is going a little sideways or potential partnership is going a little sideways.
Yeah. So, it looks like from what you've shared so far, the keys to being a good business development professional or even a business development leader is one, building, maintaining, and nurturing those relationships. Two, being acutely aware of what your prospect or what your partner's pain points are, and having a set of solutions or a solution that will address it. Because if that's there, it looks like everything else will sort itself out.
Mm-hmm.
And three, just understanding that there may be different ways that a relationship can be structured, and benefit may not be, imminent or right away, but
Right.
there's different ways you can think about it. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Every partnership is like a snowflake, right? It's got different angles, different sizes, different shapes. There's never a straight line from point A to point B. Every partnership wants to be, every partner likes to be treated a little differently. Some like a more proactive approach where you're kind of in their face and in front of their sales team and making inroads to their partnership channel and but others are much more like, hey, we'll call you when we need you. Don't bug us, okay? And those are the ones that are more transactional in nature, where you kind of put them off to the side and pull them out when you need.
Yeah, yeah, and then clearly there have been folks that have helped you and been a mentor and a source of support for you, especially because of the take that you have on relationships. Anybody in particular that you'd like to thank?
Call out?
Call out.
No, absolutely. There are a couple of people that I've worked with, and mostly at I would say at Avalara. I think gentleman by the name of Kim Hayden. He and I had really structured the relationship at Epicor, between Epicor and Avalara. He's been a great mentor of mine. He's kind of taught me the ropes when it comes to partnerships and the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mm-hmm.
The ugly is the contract side of things sometimes, and the good is going to the events and having a little fun, right? So it's at the end of the day, it's he's been remarkably helpful in my career, and likewise he's learned a lot from me, I think, and it's been a very good relationship. Another gentleman that I worked with first at between Avalara and Epicor was Marshall Kushnerik. He was the global head of business development at Avalara, and he and he hired me at Avalara, so I have him to thank for just the job, the role, and probably for the career in business development, really, because he was the one that gave me initially the leash to do what I wanted to do.
That's amazing. It's so nice to hear, that there are people that are out there that are willing to invest in you and support in you. And I hope that, anyone that's listening to this podcast will, find these people, surround themselves, with people like this, but also give back. And I think that's a critical component of relationship building is treating it as a two-way street.
Yeah, no,
Tim,
likewise. Yeah.
Last question for you. Let's just jump on a time machine. If you could go back in time and you found a younger, not to say that you're old by any means,
younger, better looking, better in shape.
I think you aged with time, Tim. Given that I've kind of seen you 4 years ago, and now
all this gray is just a testament to being part of a startup culture, I think.
But if you could go back in time and you saw a younger version of Tim Teeter, sitting at that yard outside and going through accounting homework, and you could just go and give one piece of advice from all the years of experience you've had and what you've learned, what would that be? It could be personal, it could be professional, but what would you tell young Tim?
Yeah, listen, the path I took to get here. I mean, this is where I'm at now is where I'd like to be for a very long time. I love working at startup companies. I love working with technology. Love having the network I have right now. I'm not sure I would have started. I think I would have chosen a different major in college other than accounting. I might have chosen something within business. But it might have been something closer to sales, quite frankly, because I've always kind of had the entrepreneurial gene, spirits, what have you. I think I would have gone more into a salesy type of a role, or not necessarily like straight up net new sales, but something along those lines. And I think I would have chosen to work at smaller companies from the get-go. I really do like working at small organizations where you have a lot of impact. You can see on a day in, day out basis the impact that you have at the company, the partnerships that you grow, the sales that you make. They really do have an impact on everybody, and I love to I love to see things grow. So if I were just to have some advice, I would have told myself, don't settle, don't stick at a job which it might not necessarily be your cup of tea. Mm-hmm. And I think follow your entrepreneurial gene, which was the one that I had. I think I was going to start scratching it later in my career, but I'm glad I'm here.
That's amazing, Tim. Thank you for spending time with us. We got some great pieces of information and advice from you. I've gotten to know you a little bit better through this exercise, and again, really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Pleasure.